Hi everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good after. Is there any echo? Okay. Hi everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. My name is Pranav Bhagat, and I am a senior developer advocate here at ServiceNow. And I bring you our latest episode of Creator Toolbox, where we talk about new features that are coming in the current release. We are in the middle of the Washington release, and as you can see on your screen now, we have a full content calendar, and this episode happens to be our first episode from the W release itself. So I like today we're gonna cover ServiceNow RPA, and Daniel. Oh, I have Daniel Grace with me to talk about what's new in RPA. So Daniel, why not you introduce yourself? Then we're gonna start off.
All right. Thank you, Pranav. Hello and welcome, everyone. Good day, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. My name is Daniel Drees. I am a product success manager at ServiceNow for creator workflows. That's up here, there. So everything you use to build applications from App Engine, App Engine Studio, and all the things around Automation Engine, Doc Intel, RPA, and all the other fancy tools around. Pleasure to be here today to talk about what we do with RPA in Washington.
Awesome. I think I'm really excited to know about some of the feature. I already talked about it during tech now, but it would be great to see a demo. So stages are yours, Daniel. Yeah, so let's get started with it.
All right. So Washington. Well, Washington is in early availability, so Safe Harbor has to apply, right? It is not fully released yet, but we are very close to it. So probably everything I'm saying today will be in the product, but things might change, so don't make any specially purchasing decisions and things like that based on my statements today. With that out of the court, let's move forward and see what we have today. So I'll focus in this session on two blocks: things we changed in the desktop design studio and things we did on the RPA hub side of things, more on the ServiceNow instance and how they interact together. We have a lot of new features, a lot of great new stuff. I picked out my favorites. There's a few more, well, maybe to my extent, to my feeling, to my rating, lesser important, but they are still there. So please check out the release notes. You might find more other gems that are interesting for you. These are just my personal favorites out of the RPA release in Washington. And I have prepared a couple of demos for the different things. So to make that interactive, please also use the chat, speak up, post your questions, and we will try to address them as we go forward. So let's start. The first one I have here on the list, RPA Desktop Design Studio, our authoring environment for automation flows that you use to build these fancy robots helping you to do the mundane work. A tiny change, but I think it's an important change, is actually our connection manager. When you log into the ServiceNow instance, most of you that have used it before probably have seen that the login screen didn't really render nice in our connection manager. You always had to use the external browser like Chrome or Edge or whatever you were using to actually log in. We finally fixed that. The login in the connection manager works just fine. And we'll see that in a minute when we log in. So much simpler, no more external browser that need to open up.
I think I think I I think Daniel, I love this one because I remember like whenever we had to log in, we have to select like launch in a default browser, otherwise it opens in an Internet Explorer. So that will be handy. Like it won't cause like interruptions for RP dev. So really,
Absolutely.
really
That works for desktop. It works for the attended robot, for the unattended robot. So we fixed it for all of them. Finally, yay! That was good. It was long due, I would say. And we will see that
yes.
in a minute as I go into the demo. So I don't do a demo specifically of that, but you'll see it in just a
Oh,
minute as I go in. Second one I have in here follows a complicated name, Shadow DOM support. And I know that's a technical term that maybe not everybody understands what it is. In a nutshell is there are websites out that use a technology called Shadow DOM, and our technology was not able to query that website and find elements and actually use controls on that. And most primarily example for us is ServiceNow ourselves. We use Shadow DOM, so you could not build a robot automating against ServiceNow instance. I had actually a customer, I do have a customer that wants to use RPA to talk to a customer's instance of him because they are not allowed to use some kind of integration technology, which typically we do. And that's a very, let's say, critical, sensible customer. Not saying where they're working in, but very sensible. And they had to use RPA, and they couldn't do it against the ServiceNow instance. With Washington, this is fixed, and I'll give you a demo on that in just a moment. That's great. We finally support that. The third one, and then I'll move into a demo and show you all three of them.
So, Daniel, like, sorry to interrupt you. Like, I'll go back to the Shadow DOM thing. Our audience is ServiceNow developers, so they might not be familiar with the Shadow DOM or something. So maybe like if you can give a one-liner or two-liner what it is, and that would help them.
Yes, sure, absolutely. Thank you, Pranav. So the DOM is the document object model, which is used in browsers to render a web page. So that DOM consists of all the text fields, the labels, the images, everything is part of that DOM in the browser. And we use a technique when you install a plugin in Chrome or in Edge that crawls basically through the DOM and adds little tags to it and saying, hey, this is ServiceNow. We want to be able to work with that element. And the shadow DOM is kind of a hidden DOM, so you don't see it necessarily in the browser. And our plugin was not able to read that content that's underneath the shadow DOM. So all we would see as ServiceNow, as our RPA technology, was a black box. And what's in that black box, we had no idea. Now we are able to crawl into that shadow DOM and see all the elements underneath. That's why the screenshot is there for ServiceNow screen, where you see that drop-down box being highlighted, and it's a tag select. We know what it is. We can actually work with that.
Awesome. Yep.
All right. Third one, and then I'll move in a quick demo and show basically all three of them, is set password. When you work with RPA and you interact with other, let's say, back-end applications, you might need to orchestrate against an ERP system, a financial system, whatever have you. Usually your robot needs to log in to that environment. We have, and we'll come to credentials in a moment as well, we always have the possibility to store credentials in the ServiceNow world in an encrypted and safe manner. But at the time the robot was executing, we needed the password decrypted. It had to be clear text, so we can actually tell the robot, type that into that password field. This is kind of sensible information. We don't want to have that password being visible if we don't need to, right? So now we have a new component, set password, which will allow us to use the encrypted or secure string, as we call it in the desktop, to be passed onto a password field. And I'll show you that as well, how that works. With that, let's move into the first part of a bit of an interactive demo. Let me get my back to my desktop. So quickly close that. We'll start RPA Design Studio. Yeah. So that hasn't changed. You've seen that before. And the first change you will see now is as it comes up with the login box, the connection manager, we don't need the external browser.
Yay.
Just a second to pop up here. Loading components. Obviously, when you install that the first time on a Washington instance, make sure you get all the updates. It will take a few moments to load and get all the plugins downloaded and everything. So make sure you get the latest and greatest version and update your Windows environment. Here we go. With a new beautiful rendering of the ServiceNow login screen here. No, and if I would go back actually to the instance, you can see I don't use that launch in default browser anymore. Just say mark as default and that's it. Now let's log in. Connect. Now that's the first very nice and change that will make life a lot easier. Logging in, and here we get the new studio. It looks the same. The big change is the version number down here, right? You get 7.0, which is now the Washington notation with a bundle of 8.0, but here we are. Now let's say we make a new unattended automation. Log into ServiceNow. I want to show you quickly the Shadow DOM capabilities and the secure password piece, right? So I do have this one open, so let's just log out for a moment. This is on my ServiceNow instance, right? And already this page is using what is called a Shadow DOM, right? In previous Washington, our capture features would not be able to do anything in here. Right now, I can actually just go to global objects and you see another tiny change. We can actually add connectors from here. I don't need to drag and drop them. They're just here in a nice list. Where do we have the universal app? add connectors, and it's there. I don't need to find it somewhere in the toolbox. It's just one of these tiny things that I didn't mention explicitly in the slide deck.
Yeah, I think these tiny things add a lot of value for RP developers, like
Yeah,
quality of life improvements, we should call them,
yeah.
and they're really helpful.
So let's grab our login page, add that to the screen. And now I start capture elements on that page. And immediately you can spot it actually highlights elements on that screen. Before it would be just one big red box and you couldn't select anything. Right now I can. So if I go here, for example, to username, and another nice thing I didn't actually mention, you can see the name is pre-populated. Now it's not just an empty field and you have to name it. Actually, it's intelligent and figure out what the label is and takes that over. Another really helpful thing, right? So let's just capture these 3 elements. Going back, you can see we have them now in here. All of them, username, password, not important. That's the login box. It's not important. Okay. Maybe that's a name we should change. But other than that, it captures name, all is there. It's just fine. And now the thing I can do here is, let's say username behaves like before, right? We can just say set text. Come on. Put my name in here if I want to do that. And if I go to the password field, it actually does have a new feature called set password, which I can concatenate. And this one accepts now a secure string, which means it's an encoded value. At this point, I don't have that. I'll come to that back to that later when we talk about credentials in RPA Hub. This one will now accept the secure string, which I cannot just type in here. So be secure. It has to be encoded beforehand. And I can pass it in to populate a value. And this will just work. If I can run that from here, you will actually see it just takes a moment to execute, just like before, a couple seconds, and then we should at least have the username there. Yeah, this one obviously fails because we don't have a password. But if we get here, the username is populated, means our Shadow DOM feature worked. We were able to get in, we were able to interrogate the page, and that's that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think this is a game changer for building all these RPA automations because a lot of websites support Shadow DOM capabilities, and also this is something a really great improvement.
Awesome. So let's go back to the presentation. We have been in set password full screen. Another nice thing we have added is what we consider a graceful stop. Now, when you have a robot that executes something ideally in a loop, right? You're processing a lot of records. Maybe you are looping through an Excel sheet with hundreds of rows and doing something for each and every row. Up to now, there was 2 options you had. Either wait till it's done, or you forcefully quit it and just kill the whole process, which kind of leaves you in a state you don't know how far it went and didn't do kind of a cleanup thing, something like that, right? It was really just a forceful kill. Now you have the option to do what we call a graceful stop within ServiceNow when you want to stop a process, which means basically ServiceNow will tell the robot, hey, next time you can, please stop. It's kind of kind ask. It's not a forceful quit. And the way this works is in your automation, we have a component called graceful stop, which will give you a Boolean value back. Am I supposed to stop? Yes or no? So as you design your automation, you can put that component on any place where it would make sense to stop. Coming back to the looping example, maybe after every row of action, you come back, am I good to continue, or is there maybe something else I should be doing, right? So you can gracefully stop, freeing up the robot to do other work, for example. Things like that is now possible. And as I said, the way it works, you put these graceful stop components into your automation at the places where you say this is a good time to actually stop. If this component is not there, the graceful stop from ServiceNow will not work. Right? This one will say, well, sorry, there is no graceful stop. We can't gracefully exit. We have to forcefully quit it. So we know that a graceful stop is used, and we provide that option. If it's not used, it's not there, you can't do it.
It's more about like we can logically quit the app, like our automation, so that we don't get data inconsistencies and inefficiencies in the back end. So
Correct.
that's a nice feature.
That's your time to kind of clean up, maybe move away directories, folders, files that you have started working on, put yourself a marker how far you have come, things like that, right? You gracefully end instead of just killing it.
So, Ryan, this is like I'm getting curious. We have a stop button in our bot process that's there. So if we press on the stop button, Like, do you think, like, what happens? Like, will it gracefully stop, or it will just stop then and there if the graceful stop component is used?
So if you click on that stop button, that dialog you see in the back will pop up saying, hey, I see this is running on a given machine, right? I blurred that out as it's kind of burping out my virtual robots, right? But it will show you this process is currently running on this and that machine. It's in busy state, and it gives you the option to gracefully stop if that automation has a graceful stop. If it doesn't, you don't get that option. It just kills it.
Gotcha. Perfect.
And that's obviously hard to show in a demo, so please go around and play with that. I put in at least a screenshot so you kind of refer to how it works. But yeah, for a demo, that takes a little more setup in having a process running for longer time. Another piece we added is what we call a bot process restriction. So what does that mean? And let me maybe show you that in the demo piece again, if we move over to Studio. So whenever I am developing a automation, for testing purposes, I need to assign a bot process. I need to say, hey, please, and early on we called that impersonate. We kind of say, do as if you would be running, let's say, RPA challenge on this machine, because I might not develop on the machine it's actually running, right? I might develop on my local desktop, but running should be somewhere in a data center. So I'm saying, hey, please do as if you would be that robot executing that process somewhere in a different machine. Now, this works great, but it poses the risk that you actually select a robot that might run, for example, an invoice process or an ERP process that I personally should not have access to, right? Because maybe it captures some credentials from the bot process where I can see logins coming back to the unencrypted or decrypted passwords and things like that, that I could suddenly see as an RP developer that I should not be able to see. Now, with a restricted bot process, we actually limit that. And if you see that, for example, if I want to say, hey, please do that shipping process, I get a message like, hey, looks like you don't have permission to do that robot. You, Daniel, are not allowed to run this robot because it might expose data to you that you're not supposed to see. So we have that as an extra security isolation layer to control who has access, which of your developers has access to which robot automation. You might have a large developer farm. You might even democratize RPA development to give it to citizen developers or into business teams. And with that, you have the opportunity to allow who can see what. And that is actually done in RPA Hub. Let me just go there so you can see where that is. Okay. Obviously, being on camera. Password. There we go. So on RPA Hub, another thing, you find RPA Hub now in workspaces, so no need to fiddle in the all menu and go way deep. It is just here in workspaces, RPA Hub. And in here, I'll go to my bot process. Let's take, for example, the RPA challenge that I just showed. On that RPA process, we now have a related list. Once it's loaded, that allows us to control who has access to these robots. Where is it gone? Why is it? I can't find it in here. Oh, where did it go? No, it's not here. Sorry, my bad. It's actually on the robot. Yep, my fault. So I'll go to the robot machine. On that robot machine, go over to the machine, not to the relationship. We have that list assigned studio users that says who is allowed to impersonate a bot process of that machine. So that's in here where you can control that. I'm surprised to not see my name at the moment. So where did it go? Did I have a filter? I'll check for that in a moment. But that's basically where you can say, hey, within Studio, who is allowed to impersonate this machine? Right? That's that setting. That will bring you back to this error message if you are not part of that. Even if you're full administrator on the ServiceNow instance, you still need to have that assigned bot process privilege assigned studio users. You can see that here it's on assigned studio users on Daniel's VM. So I took that screenshot from, should be there. Wherever it's gone in my instance at the moment, probably a filter. That allows
Got
me
it.
access to that given bot, right?
Yeah, I think it's an added layer of security that's added, like who can access certain bot processes and everything. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the intention is bots use, for example, credentials or sensitive data. They might use HR information, and you don't want to expose that to every RPA developer. You want to limit who has access to certain automations, right?
Yeah, and I think like this time we have focused a lot on security thing. So Daniel, I think there is one thing that also came up is the queue sensitive content,
That,
right? So
yes.
that's also there. So we have queue sensitive content, we have set password secure, we have bot process restrictions. So a lot of things like the RP team has done to improve the security.
As you mentioned that, it is in the slides in a few slides down, but as you mentioned, let's go there. We have onto the queues. Now we need to think which one. I think it was the invoice queue that I set up for this one. On the queue now you have a new flag which says, if you scroll, is it sensitive content? Yeah, here. Is work item content sensitive? You see this is a new checkbox. In this case, it's activated. Once it's activated, you can't change it back anymore. It's a one-time switch. You set it and forget it, it's there. And this means everything in that content on that queue is sensitive and should not be exposed. If I now look into one of the work items, for example, I put in here, this is a sensitive item, and you scroll down, you still see like status and queue and stuff like that. You still see that, that's fine, but request content, this field, you don't see the content any longer. This is used standard encryption on the platform, and only the robot will be able to read. Right? Even an administrator has no easy way to get there. Yeah, obviously, it is ServiceNow encryption on the platform. If you are malicious enough, you will probably find a way to get there, but it is at least hidden from the suspicious eye. It's not that easy to get to anymore.
Got it. So then, like, do we need to do anything else in the design studio if we just enable this queue as sensitive? Do
No,
we need to
that's it.
do anything? Oh,
That's it.
that's
From the
perfect.
automation in the studio, it's just working the same way than before.
And this is by default, like sensitive, or is it
By default,
something
is
like?
off. If you want to use that feature, you need to turn it on onto the queue, right? So that's basically, come on, back onto that queue record, onto the details. This flag is off by default, and you need to enable it where you actually want it.
Gotcha.
Awesome. So let's move forward. So that's kind of high level on the desktop design studio piece of things. Now let's look at RPA Hub, what we introduced there. Also there, I think quite a few good, important security relevant features. Talking about security, the first one that has highly been asked in I would say almost every customer that I talk to about RPA is external credentials. We always had credentials in the ServiceNow world, right? We store them as part of your bot process, as part of the credential sets. And we stored the username and the password encrypted and safe, all good, but we still stored it in the ServiceNow instance. Now, using external credentials, we can actually store them somewhere else. And let me quickly show you on a high level how that works. Clearing out a few things here. Yeah, close. I think, was it in here already? So here we have a bot process. It's called an invoice process. You can see it has a Windows credentials. We always need that to log to the Windows machine. And if I'm not mistaken, you can see already here the Windows credentials we can store externally, but also the application credentials where I did that here in the example. We have an ERP credential, which we say is actually an external credential. So it's not stored in ServiceNow. Then we ask you, where do you store that externally? In this case, there's one record called demo CyberArk, and I'll show what that means in a moment. And what kind of input does that credential store need to get us the password? In this case, it just needs a name, credential data, but you could have kind of all kinds of different inputs that are required to find the password in that credential store. Now, how does that work? How do we know to get to a CyberArk and get the credentials from CyberArk? To get in here, we have our external credential vault as part of the administration. And here we have just one currently, demo CyberArk. That's kind of the standard record we ship. By default, it's inactive, so if you want to use it, activate it. But the technique behind actually is we give it a name and we give it a subflow. So we are using a flow in Flow Designer to get to the actual credential. So technically, how does it work? Let me see, and I got a slide on that. It's straight out of the documentation slide. So if our robot here on top of the screen needs a password, it will actually send the question to the ServiceNow instance saying, hey, I need the following credential. And if that credential is enabled for external credentials, then we will call the subflow, passing the parameters that we just showed, that JSON piece. And that subflow can do whatever it needs to do to get to the password. We bring you an example flow for CyberArk, but you can build your own flows going to HashiCorp, to Azure Key Vault, to any other vault that you have. You would just need, all you need to do is basically build that flow that might be using a mid server, might be using a REST call external, wherever you keep your passwords. Right? That flow, all it has to do is return the password and give it back to the robot. That's how it works. And this is a completely extensible architecture, so you can do any kind of external credentials that you need.
Absolutely. I think I've also talked with customers, and one of their thing was like they don't want to store the credentials directly. So this thing is something like will remove their hesitancy to use the RPA thing.
Absolutely, yeah. It opens so much more doors, and we understand, right? That is one of the number one things that was asked in the past. Absolutely. The only thing to keep in mind is obviously when the robot needs the credential, it might take a few extra seconds to get it. So your automation execution time will get slightly longer because we need to reach out to your credential vault and get the password. Usually that should not be a problem, but if you have time sensitive things, just keep that in mind. Maybe don't do it too often. Moving on. Another very nice feature for agents working with RPA is what we call the embedded taskbar automation. And let me show you a demo of that and then go behind how that is done. So let's close a few screens here. Let's go to, I got an incident prepared somewhere. Okay, incident, here we go. So imagine you have a support agent working on a customer case or on a internal IT incident ticket. It could be on any task-based record, basically. They look at the record, say, hey, look, we have here mismatched currency on some product web page, blah, whatever, right? So they are here and say, well, now I would want my robot to help me to navigate to the exact place, let's say, maybe open that product web page or open the CRM system to find more information about Alyssa as maybe the customer, something like that. What you had to do up to now, using the attended robot, you would probably go down here, start your attended robot, find the robot, had a couple of clicks to get there and get the thing rolling, right? Now with embedded taskbar automation, you can get a button, your classic UI action, get currency price, for example. And when you click on that, it flashes for a second and you will see, oh, attended robot is launching and executing the robot immediately. So no more searching where to go, what to do. You can pass in information from the current record into the robot. That robot is not the fastest. You can see it's launching it. The attended robot, it's our VM, so just a bit demo pieces, but it's getting there. It's launching it just for you with a simple click of one button, getting there and executing your robot. This is a fantastic piece when you have attended robots and you want to integrate these attended robots with a ServiceNow process without the need of kind of media breaks clicking around. So
And I think this is one of the amazing features, Daniel, that came in the release, because what I felt is like when we are creating a lot of forms in the middle to pass the data to third-party applications, we could have directly utilized the forms and all. I asked this thing to the product team, and they said like something is coming up very soon, and that's embedded task automation. So now it's very easy to leverage the ServiceNow forms rather than creating the middleware form to pass data to that form, then to third-party application, which it will save a lot of time for RP devs for this.
Absolutely. You see here now that is the attended robot bringing up a box, right? It launched a browser. It could launch anything, right? It could do anything it wants to do. Maybe, let's say, just convert US dollars to Japanese. It's checking that web page and should come back, I think, with probably this one here. That's just a robot execution. Yeah, it's 149 Japanese yen, right? And you could pass in information from the ServiceNow instance, as mentioned before. So you could say, well, actually, I don't want to convert $1 US. I need to convert 59 because that's what the customer asked for. Things like that you can start doing. And the beauty of that, as I close that down, yes, I want to close it. I will close down everything again, come back to the screen. The beauty of it is so simple to get that button. again, let's just go to RPA workspace. And I show you how to configure that because it is actually really, really simple. You go in here in your build piece, you have a menu called attended configurations. And that's where you define where to see these UI actions. Right? You get in here, it has an active, inactive flag, so you can turn it on and off. We can see which bot it should execute, what's the label, which table, oops, no Copilot, which table it is triggering on, so that any task table will work basically, and you define a trigger. If I go to edit this one, yes, move it into edit state, we can actually also modify, switch scope, okay, classic scope piece. I can move into edit conditions, and I can say, hey, in this case, I said if the short description contains currency and the state is in progress, then show this button. All it does in the back is it will create a UI action record. It will mark these conditions for the record and do all the wiring behind so you can use it. This works great. Caveat, currently it works only for classic UI. If you want to have these buttons also from a, let's say, a workspace or a now UX framework, you'll need to add the declarative action on top. But the docs will tell you how to do. That's on our list as next, right? We started with the classic UI here. All right.
I think
yeah.
Daniel, I have one question on this particular thing. So for example, I have like multiple fields that I'm getting from the form itself, but there is one particular field, like one particular piece of information that I need to pass. So do I need to create a proper field, or can I just create some other record or something like that? Oh yeah, the field parameter mapping. I'm just thinking like, can we just map a default value to a particular field? Like I need to
going
pass.
into the robot, you mean, or?
Yes,
yeah.
Going into the robot.
A default value. So the field parameter mappings control what information from the current record you want to pass into the execution of the robot. I have not tried to put in a fixed value. What I've seen is mapping an existing field from the record. I would need to try that. Can't say on the top of my head.
Gotcha. I'll also try it because I haven't tried that too. So I thought like maybe you would have tried it.
Well, if it's a fixed value, you can still put it as a process parameter on the bot process because it won't change, right? The idea for these ones is really changing context-sensitive information.
Gotcha. What I meant by that is like, for example, I'm passing the information from a particular incident to a bot, right? For that particular incident, let's suppose I need to pass certain comments or something which doesn't have a particular field on the form itself. So how we can do that? So that's kind of a thing I was thinking. Maybe I'll try that thing.
Yeah, sure. Let me know. I'm happy to get your feedback and the use cases to talk about how we can add that.
Yes.
Awesome. So let's move forward. So that was embedded taskbar automation, right? Got a little screenshot here of that attended configuration, a request in that case. And yeah, that's just a screenshot, but I've given you the demo part of it. Next part, sensitive data in queues. We talked about that. You brought it up, Pranav. Absolutely. We have that work item content sensitive, which will hide the request content. Only the request content, not the response. So if the robot sends something back into the response field, that is currently not considered sensitive. Let us know your feedback if you think that is also something we should protect. But for the time being, it's only the request content. Track automation logs is another, I believe, it's a kind of it sounds like a tiny thing, but I think it's really a major changer. It helps a lot. Actually means we are tracking log messages from the robot execution within ServiceNow. You don't need to go to the robot machine and find some log files and stuff like that. We have that within ServiceNow. And let me show you how that looks. If I go again to my RPA challenge robot, I believe, you all know the process jobs list, which is whenever that process is executed, you get an entry in here. It was executed at which machine, how long did it take, and stuff like that. And if I open, for example, the last execution, which was yesterday, we get a new tab here saying automation logs. And I see messages like bot started, launching browser, bot finishes, browser closed. So we get log messages from the robot in here. And how does that look in the robot? Let me go to this piece. and just open that so you can see it. If I open remote project, RPA challenge, it's a part of the demo. Yeah, that's the right one. You can see we have here the log component. That's the log component you have been using already. That hasn't changed on the surface, but underneath now it's actually taking that message and pushing it to ServiceNow rather than only to this execution log down here. You will still see it here. If I execute the robot, you still see it down here. But as it's executed from ServiceNow, this messages will be pushed into the ServiceNow instance. And this is a great relief. You can put in a lot of different points in your automation, log messages, how far you've come, like loops 1 out of 1,000 or something like that. And suddenly within here, you can see what your robot is doing without the need to go onto the virtual machine that the robot is executing. That's a great, great piece of making life easier for administrators to know what's actually happening. Right, and we keep that per job separated. We get a sequence number. We actually purge the stuff, obviously, also as after X number of days and things like that. So we take care of the housekeeping here. But we have them in here, and that is a big, big help. Drag automation logs. Yeah, there's the screenshot. You get that in as a reference. Exactly what I've shown you at the moment. And I think this is pretty much the last piece that I have here. Maybe not so much developer focus, but at least maybe towards citizen developer piece. We have added the help center to RPA Hub. So if you're now in RPA Hub at any time, you can click the question mark and it will open up the help content. Let me just pin that for a moment, and it will find stuff relevant for the process, for the entry that you're on. So if I go, for example, on a bot process, you can see it's refreshing. It's looking for content that makes sense. Come on, loading. And it should give us information about what is a bot process. Yeah, what is a bot process? How to assign a configuration, other helpful resources. And as you navigate around in RPA Hub, it will kind of constantly refresh and show you relevant content for the things that you're working on at the moment. That's especially great for new starters. Once you are probably a seasoned, experienced RPA developer, you don't need it anymore. You can turn it off again. It will disappear.
And I think
And
you
it's great.
mentioned, I think Daniel, you mentioned correctly, like it's for new developers who are just starting with ServiceNow RPA solution, and also for release managers. They won't be having, because they might be just started doing releases with RPA, and also this particular help center will help them. And I think I saw that we have added like almost 200 topics, health
Wow,
topics and everything. So
that's impressive. I didn't know the
that's
number.
I was talking with product team, so and I saw a list. I think there are like around 100 to 200 topics that they have added on this thing. So that's amazing.
That should make the adoption of it so much easier, right? As you get to what you need to when you need it, basically. Let me see, did I have anything else? No, that was what I had prepared for today's What's New in RPA. Have there been any
Amazing.
questions, comments, feedbacks?
I think like one question I answered already in the chat was around about stop button thing, or developers are getting confused like stop button and graceful stop button. So the easiest, simplest answer is like stop button stops the automation then and there, without looking into anything. Graceful stop, if you use it logically, it will stop the automation based on the logic that you created in the automation, so that you don't get data inefficiencies and all. Like one of the use cases is like, for example, if a RP bot is filling a particular form, right, from a third party, like third party application or something, we click on stop button, the record won't be filled fully and it will just stop there. But if you use the graceful stop component, it will go ahead and stop the after the form is fully filled, so that you don't get like data incomplete or something for that. Other thing, Daniel, like this is something I was just reading about, like we mentioned about CyberArk thing, right? We can store external credential there. So for example, if a RP bot is calling a subflow, right, that is, can that, like for example, I'm still trying to understand the use case, but can that subflow, do we need to store local credential for it, or is it like going into
Well,
external credential?
So that subflow, if you want to integrate, let's take CyberArk for an example, or HashiCorp, it's the same thing basically. That would use an integration hub spoke to connect to CyberArk. So the credential to get to your vault, yes, would be stored in ServiceNow as part of your integration setup, your spoke setup, but we don't have individual credentials like for an ERP system or an HR system. We would not store these in ServiceNow. We'd only have that one credential to your vault, and from there we can get the credentials that we need at the time we need them, and we only pass them through. We'll never persist them. So it's very easy for you as a customer to turn off access, right? If you turn off that one account, we have no access to anything anymore.
Awesome. I think that's great. And yeah, I think like one of my personal favorite is the embedded task automation and health center. So what do you think, Daniel? What's your favorite pick? I know everything is awesome, but what's your one favorite pick
My
from
favorite pick, I do love the log component that we finally get the log messages in ServiceNow. If you have your robot running unattended somewhere in a data center, and suddenly you think like, why the hell is it not working? You don't need to go to the machine. You can see everything. I'm just the operations guy to see what's happening without the need to go there.
Yes, I think yeah, that will be my that was a, like I was getting like I had a dilemma like which to choose, log component or like all these things, because everything is super awesome and log component is something like for a new RP developer. When I started, like I had no idea what's going on, and at that time I had to check each and every components, try to get the error and everything. uh, that's great. I need to see, like I haven't seen like how it's logging in the backend. Is it something like detailed logs or is it just error messages and all? But I'll need to explore that. So yeah, that's all we have, folks, for you from the RPA department. I hope you enjoyed it, and we have a lot of content coming up. This is just the first episode. We covered RPA. We have Flow Designer that's coming in the evening, where I'll be with Jingfei in in the morning time for US and night time for me, and we're gonna talk about what's new coming in Flow Designer. And as you can see on the screen, I just put put a whole calendar there. Like this is what coming up. So today we have Flow. Next week we have more Creative Toolbox episode and other things that are coming up. So, and if you want to know about all these things, go ahead and go to devlink.sn/Washington. That should be coming up on your screen right now. So yeah, devlink.sn/Washington. So you will be able to find the content calendar and what's coming up. And that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you have any questions, like if you were not able to join us live and you have question, go ahead and add your question in the comment. We'll try to answer those things. And yeah, any final thoughts, Daniel, before we go off?
Uh, Thanks for having me. It was a great show. Thanks, Pranav. I love it. Coming back every time, anytime that you need me. I hope everybody has fun using these new features.
We love to have you, Daniel, always. There is always something new to learn from you. Thanks for coming. And yeah, thanks everyone. See ya. Bye bye.
Bye bye.